Following the news closely, now today, as we talk about, we'll continue to pay attention to the war between US and Iran at this moment. Remember last time we talked about who will be the successor as the head of the government. Now the breaking news came out lately. Now the son of the former supreme leader has been chosen to be the next supreme leader of Iran. At the age of 56, now, the choice of the country's assembly of experts sent a strong message of defiance against sitting U.S. President Donald Trump as Iran remained locked in a war with the nation and the nation of Israel. Now, this time, not only we're seeing the strong reaction from the U.S., and also we're seeing and also engaging with the reaction from the countries on the European side. Now, this war has caused major political and diplomatic headaches from London to Berlin. How do we understand the complication of the war at this moment? And what does that mean with sitting U.S. President Donald Trump said that the war with Iran, it's about to be complete? How do we understand that? And also, what about the impact upon the international community? Well, ladies and gentlemen, again, it's my great honor to invite back our distinguished guest, and who is Professor Jamsheed Choksy. Professor Choksy is a distinguished professor. He is a former chair of the Department of Near Eastern Languages and Cultures, former chair of the Department of Central Eurasian Studies. He is the current director of Interasia and Uralic National Resource Center at Indiana University in Bloomington. Well, Professor Choksy, and welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, again, Professor Choksy, as you and I, we had our discussion last time, the beginning of the war between U.S. and Iran. Now, the breaking news came out lately. 56-year-old, the son of the former supreme leader, has been chosen as the new leader for the nation. And of course, we're seeing the reaction from the sitting U.S. President Donald Trump, and it was not good. He was very disappointed about the choice. And based on the reaction, also based on the research, the new leader seemed to be even more hardcore towards the U.S. And also the war with U.S. doesn't seem to end very soon, according to the Iranian media report. So the first question, Professor Choksy, I want to ask is, what do we know about the new supreme leader? And also at this moment, how can we assess the reaction from both sides? One said it's the war, it's not going to end at a full measure. But from the U.S. side, Donald Trump seemed to be more confident about finishing the war. Your thoughts?
Thank you. So, Mojtaba Khamenei, he is one of the junior sons of the former supreme leader. He rose to prominence very quietly. He served in the Iran-Iraq war right at the end as a member of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards. He then went on to run his father's political office, expanding it from a small office under the previous supreme leader, the revolutionary leader Ayatollah Khomeini. But he took that office of the supreme leader and expanded it into a nationwide organization, which came to control essentially the political apparatus of Iran. He also made sure that he maintained his ties with the IRGC, and then he took over the Basij, the paramilitary that imposes law and order, or shall we say, forces people to follow the regime's will at a local level in the cities and towns and villages. So when his father was killed at the beginning of the war, technically the Assembly of Experts, which is a collection of about 86 clerics, Shia clerics, supposed to meet and elect a new supreme leader. Now, as you pointed out, when you start with the first revolutionary leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, he had stature. The second leader had less stature. Now we come to the second leader's son, who essentially has created, now we see a hereditary situation, much like the monarchy that was overthrown. Now it's moved from father to son. But it's not quite clear whether the Assembly of Experts really elected him. Everything we are hearing suggests that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps threatened the Assembly of Experts and forced this election. It is also not clear how capable right now, in a physical sense, Mojtaba is. All reports, the Iranian government confirms that Mojtaba was injured in the same strike that killed his father and other family members. There are reports that he may be in very serious condition. There are some reports that he may not even be aware that he is the new supreme leader. Now, while all that is unknown, it does appear that he is injured. It does appear that he may not actually be running the country. What this suggests is that it is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the military, and the paramilitary that's really running the country. That the civilian political apparatus has been pushed to fall into line, and that maybe Mojtaba will recover and take over. Maybe he won't. That's unclear. But what is very clear is that the Islamic Revolutionary Guards and the military has decentralized. So they're fighting the war in a very decentralized sense, which we can talk about here in a few minutes. But yes, Donald Trump made it clear that that he's not happy and I don't think any of the regional leaders are happy with the fact that you now have someone who's even more hardline, even more internally repressive, even more externally aggressive than the previous two supreme leaders. And while I think Donald Trump feels that he can end the war militarily quickly by demolishing Iran's capabilities, that remains to be seen. As we really need to talk about is what's happening with the Persian Gulf and the Straits of Hormuz. So Donald Trump may be a little too optimistic. I also, on the other hand, would say that I think the Iranian leadership is also a little too optimistic in thinking that they can hold out for as long as they believe they can.
Well, Professor, let's bring another official into our conversation. Again, keep in mind, as we discussed the first time, the war between Iran and US had a significant impact on the countries in the Middle East. Now, recently, the Prime Minister of Qatar sat down for an interview, and when he was asked regarding the war, this is what he said.
Unfortunately, there are some justifications and pretexts that they've been using to justify these attacks on the state of Qatar and the other countries, which is totally rejected, and no one will be able even to justify them.
Professor Choksy, according to the Prime Minister of Qatar, this is a lengthy response. Again, not only that lay out the foundation of the principles for the Gulf region, and also, correct me if I'm wrong, it seemed like it's targeting US and send a strong message to America to say, why are you doing this? Why are you putting us in the middle of this chaos? So in other words, remember US were under Donald Trump or even the former President Joe Biden is peace through strength. But right now, it doesn't look that way. It's like the Gulf countries are randomly get pulled into the war without any preparation or any expectancy. So Professor Choksy, the next question to you is, what do you make of the reaction according to the Prime Minister of Qatar? And why do you think that the message is not only towards Iran, but also towards the West, it's rather strong and also very, very much straightforward to the leaders? Your thoughts?
I would read that. I would read the response by the Qataris and the others in the region as essentially aimed a little more at Tehran than at Washington. I think the countries in the region have, over the years, while they have tolerated the Islamic Republic's regime, have been uncomfortable with it. Let us keep in mind that over the years, the Islamic Republic of Iran has stirred trouble in these countries. Some of your listeners and viewers may remember that many years ago, the Iranians caused a takeover of the Grand Mosque in Mecca. They have stirred trouble in Bahrain, in Saudi, in the Emirates. So there's been, shall we say, a simmering relationship, but one where the Gulf nations have tried not to get involved in direct confrontation. Now, in this case, the confrontation, in a sense, one could argue, is inevitable. However, I think from the position of the Gulf countries, they see themselves as having stayed out of direct conflict with Iran, but that Iran is the one who has attacked them. And we have seen those attacks continue. It is one thing, I think, from the position of the Gulf countries for Iran to strike at American bases in those countries. I think the Gulf countries would find that a little more acceptable. But what we have seen increasingly is Iran has picked civilian targets, hotels, shopping malls, the infrastructure, the shipments of oil and gas through the Persian Gulf. So I think what we're beginning, and also let's keep in mind that they've struck every single one of the Gulf countries. They've even attacked Turkey. They attacked Azerbaijan. They also struck Oman. And remember, everyone, your viewers will know that Oman has been the mediator in talks between the United States and Iran for many years. So essentially, it would appear that this decentralized Islamic Revolutionary Guard, I would characterize it at this point as a wounded animal that is striking out, biting, if you wish, to attacking anything and everything in sight. It makes no sense from a strategic, political, regional, any view to attack Oman or Turkey or Azerbaijan, because what you're going to get elective response against Tehran from all these countries. And I think that is what's building up, because just yesterday, the Iranians launched drone and missile strikes at a port called Dugam. Dugam is an Omani port that's on the Arabian-Indian Ocean side. Dugam is shared equally by the United States and China. It is not a military port. It is a commercial shipping port. Now the strikes on Dugam failed, but by attempting to do that, you can see how part light and subside. So essentially, they are broadening this war to, I think the philosophy regard right now is, we're just going to create as much chaos as we can in the hope that everyone will turn against the United States. What I think is going to happen is everyone is increasingly going to turn against Tehran and say, look, your battle was with the United States and Israel. You have now attacked Emirati civilians, Saudi civilians, Omani civilians, Azerbaijani civilians. So that I think the Islamic Revolutionary Guard is miscalculating. The other aspect that I think we should keep in mind is, while they are indeed able to penetrate and strike some of these areas, the number of strikes per day is exponentially decreasing, which would suggest that they are running slowly but steadily out of attack supplies.
Well, Professor Choksy, let's keep our conversation going. Again, let's talk about Israel. Because again, this is the coalition that started between US and Israel. So again, according to the report, that both US and Israel at this moment could target the new leader personally, not just in a diplomatic way, but personally, or just continue hitting Iran in hope of getting their desire changed. I mean, again, this is not something new to all of us. We know that Israel absolutely has its target on Iran. You and I, we just talk about the new leader chosen for the nation of Iran. But again, at this moment, Israel doesn't seem to back down for a minute, and instead is going all out, is going 4 gear. But on the other piece of reality is sitting US Donald Trump recently, as you know, we mentioned, claimed that we did the best we could and we did everything we wanted. And now it's time for US perhaps take a step back. How do we understand the shift between US government and Israel at this moment? So in other words, is it time for the world to expect Israel to take a step up, or perhaps, again, I dare to say, to be the lone wolf at this moment? Meanwhile, Donald Trump, it's time for him to continue to finish or to focus on the domestic affairs. Because again, keep in mind, the midterm election is going to take place right now. Majority of the Americans are not going to pay attention to what happened in Iran, but instead it's about the conversations happen at the dinner table, or even perhaps those major concerns on the daily basis. What do you say to that, Professor?
So let's take that in two parts. I think from the position of Israel, at this point, Israel cannot back down. And it cannot back down because like I said, the regime in Iran is a wounded animal. And it will continue to be more and more, shall we say, dangerous, not just to Israel, but to the entire region. So, in other words, at this point, it is dangerous to Saudis, to Qataris, etc. And let us also keep in mind that while publicly there may appear to be a lot of light between the Gulf Arab states and Israel, in reality, these states have cooperated for many, many years in terms of military, security, regional cooperation. And it is in all their interests to make sure that we don't have a rabid regime in Iran. So will the Israelis continue to go after the IRGC and Mujtaba? Most definitely. Now, and they will have at the very least tacit support from the Gulf countries, because the Gulf countries now are reeling and they know that the Iranian regime will come after them. In terms of the United States, yes, the midterm elections are determined more by domestic issues. One of those domestic issues is going to be fuel prices, gas prices for cars at the pump.
That's right.
However, let us keep in mind that the United States has a strategic gas reserve, which Donald Trump is releasing. This is not the first time we have released it. It has happened before, and then in peace times, it gets replenished. So those gas prices can be managed. They can be brought down somewhat. That's going to be U.S. domestic policy. But in terms of the United States' approach to Iran, I think one thing we are beginning to realize about Donald Trump is that Donald Trump sends mixed signals. So even as he says, we can achieve our objectives and leave the war, his lieutenants, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, etc., talk a different talk. They talk about staying on in there. Now, in a sense, one can also see this as tactical. That is, you send mixed messages so the enemy is not quite sure what you're going to do. And the one thing we have come to realize is Donald Trump is unpredictable. So we're not quite sure which way he'll go. But I think Israel is in this for the long haul. I think they will continue to go after the new supreme leader and others. But I think there's something else that we should also focus on. Whether it is Israel or the United States, when it has come to decapitation of regime leaders, they targeted the supreme leader. They targeted, of course, the people who were there with the supreme leader, some family members. They were not targeted. They were, shall we say, ancillary deaths. But the others who have been killed in this war, but also previously, the scientists, etc., they have either been people affiliated with the military or working for the military or working for the missile program. The only secular politician who has been directly targeted and killed in the current war was Mohammad Ahmadinejad, the former president of Iran, who, as we all know, spent his entire career threatening the United States and Israel. So, but the others, so far, they have not killed Larijani or Pezeshkian or any of those. So it appears that that Israel and the United States are drawing some distinctions. They're going after the clerical leadership, and even in the clerical leadership, they're going after the the ultra hardliners, and they're going after the military command, and they're going after the military installations. I think what all of them are doing is leaving space for the secular political leadership. Trump keeps talking about wanting to find someone inside the country. I think they're leaving room in the hope that if they can whittle down the fanatics, that then there's a chance for the more reasonable people to emerge. And Will, let me say this. What we're hearing from Iran right now is that the regime is not just fighting outside, it is fighting inside. We have seen the public announcements by the regime of how if anyone dares inside the country to go out on the street to protest, to say one word against the regime, they will be executed. I mean, they've said that very clearly. So they've been arrested, executed. So what we're seeing is the regime is sort of trying very hard, the military wing, to control this. It'll be interesting to see how that develops too, whether they are able to essentially hold Israel and the United States, and I would suggest eventually the Gulf countries at bay, and then keep their own population under control, or whether it fails. There's one final thing to keep in mind. Iran has now attacked Turkey twice in the last couple of weeks. The Turks are giving them warnings. There's a good chance after a third attack, the Turks will go in. And the Turks also have tremendous capability to attack Iran. I don't think Erdogan's going to sit around and let the Iranians send occasional rockets and drones to intimidate the Turkish people.
Well, again, Professor Choksy, two more questions before letting you go. As I mentioned in the intro, not only we're seeing the reaction from the West and the Middle East, let's bring some of the countries from the European side. For example, the nation of Germany, the nation of France. Now, the French President Emmanuel Macron posted on social media, again, send the message and reassurance to the citizens in France, and I quote, "We are not at war. We don't want to go to war," end quote. And also, according to the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, also she said, "We are not joining the US and Israel offensive strikes." Keep that in mind, Professor Choksy. Again, you're the expert. Why are we seeing those confirmations from Emmanuel Macron and also the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni? What does that say about the European reaction? Is this disengagement from the US when it comes to the war in Iran? Or this is another way to say, I'm sorry, we're still in the midst of the war. Again, pay attention to the war in Ukraine. We don't have extra energy. We don't have extra attention for this one unless or until the war in Ukraine finished. However the result could be, we're going to join this. But right now, it is way too much. And again, I'm putting this in a very simple way, not a diplomatic way. So again, Professor Choksy, what are the messages? What does that mean when we're seeing the media, a social media post from Emmanuel Macron and also the Prime Minister of Italy? Your thoughts?
I think you're correct about the latter conclusion, namely that the Europeans are far more focused on the immediate threat to them. That is Russia and Ukraine, and the possibility that if Russia triumphs in Ukraine, that it'll be Estonia or Poland next. And so the Europeans certainly are focused on that, and it is fair that they be focused on that. We have, however, seen that the British, while initially reluctant, have now made it clear. And again, you'll see with the British, it took a strike by Iran on a base in Cyprus. Again, a completely unnecessary attack. The British were going to stay out of it. The Iranians pulled the British into it. Even with the French position is a little more tenuous because the Iranians attacked a French base in the Persian Gulf. Again, the French had wanted to stay out of it. So the Iranians seem to be I would say, if continental European countries are dragged into the Gulf War, it will be because the Iranians have pulled them into it by attacking them, either directly or their bases in the region. And certainly, yes, the Europeans would rather focus on Ukraine. The United States and Israel would rather focus on Iran.
Professor Choksy, I do want to end our conversation to bring another interesting but also equally critical aspect of our conversation. What I am reading and the report I'm holding in right now has done by the Committee on Foreign Relations. Now, this is the report critically to talk about how China, one of the largest economies in the world, has undermined America's economic edge and also alliance advantage. Now, according to the report, of course, Professor Choksy so much about this economic competition between US and China, but one thing stood out to me, which is quite unique, and you and I, we talked about this before, is because sitting US President Donald Trump's trade war, and that actually brought major devastation towards the US economy. Based on the report, on average, American citizens spend more than $1,700 per year on domestic shopping or the daily expenses. I know this might not seem to be related to the war in Iran, but Professor Choksy, from your perspective, when we look at the relationship between US and Iran and also this economic partnership between Iran and China, do you think that today the average American citizen can actually understand we need to pay more attention to Iran, need to pay more attention to China, and also to the international crisis, in addition to what's happening today in the US internally? Your final thoughts.
I think we should keep in mind that despite all that's going on in the world, the meeting between the heads of the US and China is still on. They are going to be meeting. So I think we should keep in mind that in terms of two superpowers, there is going to be a meeting. I have a feeling that they will find a way to maintain a relationship. Yes, there is competition. And I would argue that there will have to be certain accommodations because I think, as I mentioned the last time we spoke, if I were a policymaker in Beijing, I would be extremely worried about the Gulf War because China, then this is quite open, that China is incredibly dependent on Iranian oil. Now, what and on the cheap price of Iranian oil, and Iranian oil is cheap, not because it should be cheap, but because of American sanctions. If there were no sanctions, Iranian oil would sell at the market rate. And if there was no war, that market rate would also be lower. I think what China and the United States, I am going to guess, are going to work out is to have the Gulf countries supply China with more petroleum so that Chinese economy can remain stable and move away from Iranian oil. What I think what will happen is that the balance between the United States and China will be a relationship that we worked out, because ultimately, while the relationship between Iranian oil and Iran needing Chinese supplies, while that is important, the trade relationship between the United States and China and the diplomatic and global relationship is far more important. In other words, from the viewpoint of a Chinese-American relationship, Iran is a sideshow.
Well, I mean, again, Professor Choksy, everything you talk about is absolutely correct, because again, this war between US and Iran at this moment is no longer just about the two countries. It's also generating much noises, as we mentioned before, from China in the Middle East and also the Europeans. I mean, there's another piece of reality is Donald Trump is unpredictable. And China at this moment still trying to figure out what Donald Trump wants for this diplomatic visit. But meanwhile, Donald Trump also would like to know how China feels about the temperature and the political atmosphere around the world. Well, ladies and gentlemen, again, it's such an honor to speak to Professor Jamsheed Choksy. Again, Professor Choksy is the current director of the Inter-Asia and Uralic National Resource Center at Indiana University at Bloomington. Well, Professor Choksy, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. And again, let's keep in touch and love to have you back on the show as we continue to pay closer attention to the global affairs. So thank you so much for doing this.